The wedding bells stopped mid-chime so abruptly that Ellen's sound engineer thought the audio system had malfunctioned. One moment, Ellen DeGeneres was discussing wedding planning with her celebrity guest, her audience of 300 people enjoying the light-hearted conversation about love and commitment. The next moment, complete silence as a woman in the front row stood up with tears streaming down her face and said 13 words that would change everything. "My husband fell in love with me twice. He doesn't remember our first wedding." The studio fell into stunned quiet. Ellen's smile faded as she processed what she'd just heard, her wireless microphone trembling slightly in her hand as she recognized the profound pain behind those words. It was Tuesday afternoon at the Warner Bros. Studios in Burbank. Ellen's Love Stories special was being taped, the set decorated with white flowers, romantic lighting, and photos celebrating enduring relationships. The energy had been exactly what producers expected: romantic, hopeful, filled with stories of couples who had overcome challenges together. But sitting in the front row, wearing a simple blue dress and clutching a worn military photograph, was someone whose presence would transform this ordinary Tuesday into television history. 28-year-old Sarah Mitchell had traveled from North Carolina with her husband, carrying a story that would stop Ellen's show and create the most emotional moment about love, memory, and the power of the human heart to find its way home. What Ellen didn't know was that Sarah carried a story that would redefine what it means to fall in love and prove that some connections transcend even the cruelest injuries to the mind. Sarah was a petite woman with shoulder-length auburn hair and green eyes that seemed to hold both incredible sadness and unshakable hope. She wore a simple gold wedding band that caught the studio lights, and around her neck hung dog tags, not hers, but her husband's, from his deployment. Beside her sat a man in his early 30s, with kind brown eyes, clean-cut appearance, and a small scar visible on his left temple. The show had progressed beautifully through its opening segments. Ellen danced through the audience with her characteristic joy, celebrating couples who had found lasting love against all odds. She interviewed the celebrity guest about their recent engagement, creating the kind of romantic atmosphere that made viewers believe in happily ever after. During the Love Stories segment, Ellen had been highlighting couples who had overcome extraordinary challenges to stay together. She'd spoken with several pairs about their journeys through illness, long-distance relationships, and family opposition. The atmosphere was both celebratory and inspiring, honoring love's ability to conquer seemingly impossible obstacles. Then Ellen noticed something that made her pause mid-conversation. While other couples in the audience were holding hands and smiling, Sarah was staring at the man beside her with an expression of profound longing mixed with heartbreak. The man was looking around the studio with mild confusion, as if he wasn't quite sure why he was there. "I'm sorry," Ellen said, approaching Sarah's row with the compassionate curiosity that had made her beloved by millions. "I can see you have something you'd like to share. What's your name, and who is this handsome man with you?" Sarah looked up at Ellen with eyes that carried the weight of unimaginable loss and incredible hope. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is my husband Jake. We've been married for 4 years, but he only remembers the last 8 months." The studio began to quiet as audience members sensed they were about to witness something extraordinary. Ellen felt her chest tighten as she prepared to hear about what could cause such a situation. "Sarah, can you tell us what happened?" Ellen asked gently, settling into this conversation with the patience that had made her America's favorite daytime confidante. Sarah took a shaky breath, looking at Jake with infinite tenderness before turning back to Ellen. "Jake is an Army sergeant. 15 months ago, his convoy hit an IED in Afghanistan. He suffered a severe traumatic brain injury that caused complete retrograde amnesia. He lost all his memories from before the accident." Ellen felt tears beginning to form in her own eyes. "He doesn't remember you at all?" "Nothing," Sarah replied, her voice breaking slightly. "Our wedding day, our honeymoon, the house we bought together, the plans we made for children, it's all gone. When he woke up in the hospital, I was a complete stranger to him." The cameras had instinctively moved closer, understanding they were capturing something profound about love's ability to transcend even the most devastating circumstances. Jake, who had been listening quietly, spoke for the first time. "I'm sorry, but I should explain from my perspective. When I woke up in that hospital, the doctors told me I was married to this beautiful woman I'd never seen before. I felt terrible that I couldn't remember her, couldn't remember our life together. Ellen turned to Jake with gentle curiosity. How did that feel, being told you had a wife you couldn't remember? Confusing, frustrating, heartbreaking, Jake replied honestly. Sarah would visit every day, and she'd tell me stories about our relationship, show me photos, try to help me remember, but it was like looking at someone else's life. I felt like I was failing her every day by not being the husband she remembered. Sarah reached over and took Jake's hand. The doctors said his memories might never return. They recommended I consider that the man I married might be gone forever. The silence in the studio was now complete as everyone understood they were witnessing a love story that defied every expectation. But Sarah, Ellen said softly, you're here together. What changed? Sarah's face lit up with the kind of joy that comes after surviving the impossible. About 6 months into his recovery, something amazing started happening. Jake began asking me questions, not about our past, but about me, who I was now, what I liked, what made me laugh. Jake nodded, his own eyes beginning to shine. I realized I couldn't remember loving Sarah, but I could feel myself starting to care about her in the present. She was this incredible woman who visited me every day, who was patient with my confusion, who made me laugh even when I was frustrated. Ellen felt chills run down her spine. You started falling in love with her again? Completely, Jake said, turning to look at Sarah with obvious adoration. I couldn't remember our first relationship, but I was experiencing our second one in real time. And Sarah, this patient, kind, beautiful woman who refused to give up on us, I fell head over heels in love with her all over again. Sarah began crying openly now. It wasn't the same love, it was new love, built on who we are now, rather than who we used to be. In some ways it was even deeper because Jake chose to love me without any obligation, without any memory of promises we'd made. That's when Ellen made a decision that would define this moment forever. She stood up and addressed her production team with an excitement that surprised everyone. Sarah and Jake, Ellen announced, I have something very special planned. But first, I need to ask you both a question. Jake, knowing what you know now, having fallen in love with Sarah twice, would you marry her again? Jake didn't hesitate for even a second. Ellen, I would marry Sarah every day for the rest of my life if she'd let me. She's the most incredible woman I've ever known. Twice. Ellen turned to Sarah. And Sarah, would you marry this man again, knowing that your love story is completely unique, that you've proven love can literally happen twice with the same person? Sarah nodded through her tears. I would marry Jake 100 times. He may not remember our first wedding, but our second love story is the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. That's when Ellen made an announcement that stunned everyone in the studio. Well then, today is your lucky day, because we're going to give you the wedding you both deserve, right here, right now. From the backstage area, a wedding officiant emerged, followed by Ellen's production team carrying flowers, a white dress, and a tuxedo. The studio had been secretly prepared for this moment, with white fabric draping the set and an aisle created down the center of the audience. Sarah and Jake, Ellen announced as the studio erupted in applause. You're going to renew your vows today, not to remember your first wedding, but to celebrate your second love story. Sarah looked at Ellen in amazement. Ellen, we can't possibly... Yes, you can, Ellen interrupted. Because what you two have proven is that love isn't about memory, it's about choice. Jake chose to fall in love with you again, and you chose to let him, even though it meant accepting that your first love story was over. As Sarah changed into the wedding dress and Jake into the tuxedo, Ellen addressed her audience with words that would become legendary. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to witness something that has never happened in the history of love. A man who fell in love with the same woman twice, and a woman who had the courage to let him. The ceremony was simple but profound. Jake's vows brought tears to every eye in the studio. Sarah, I can't remember promising to love you the first time, but I can promise you now. I choose you today, tomorrow, and every day after. You taught me that love isn't about the past. It's about the present moment, when two hearts decide they belong together. Sarah's vows were equally moving. Jake, you gave me the most precious gift anyone could give. You proved that our love is stronger than memory, deeper than history. You chose me without obligation, loved me without expectation. That's not a second chance. That's a miracle. When they kissed as husband and wife for the first time, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Ellen made another unprecedented decision. She walked to her desk and wrote out a check, returning to the couple with a gift that would help them build their new life together. "This is for you," Ellen said, handing them a check for for whatever you need to build the life you're choosing together now. "But more than that, I want to start the Jake and Sarah Mitchell Foundation for military families dealing with traumatic brain injury." But Ellen wasn't finished. She reached into her jacket and pulled out her personal business card. "This has my direct number," she said, pressing it into Sarah's hand. "Because what you two have shown us today is that love isn't just something that happens to us, it's something we choose every single day." As the episode concluded, Ellen addressed her audience with words that would be remembered forever. Today we learned that love isn't about remembering the past. It's about choosing the present. Jake and Sarah Mitchell proved that the human heart doesn't need memory to recognize its home. The episode aired exactly as it happened, becoming the most watched wedding renewal in television history. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans organizations and brain injury support groups reported unprecedented interest in their services. The Jake and Sarah Mitchell Foundation, established with Ellen's donation, has since provided support for over 200 military families dealing with traumatic brain injury and memory loss. Their story has been featured in medical journals as an example of how love and patience can create new neural pathways even when old ones are damaged. 6 months after their Ellen appearance, Jake's memories began returning in fragments. But remarkably, instead of replacing his new love for Sarah, the returning memories enhanced it. He could remember loving her before, and feel himself loving her now, creating a depth of emotion he described as loving the same person in stereo. Jake and Sarah returned to Ellen's show a year later with news that brought the house down. Sarah was pregnant with their first child. "This baby will know both versions of our love story," Sarah told Ellen, "the one we can't remember and the one we chose to create." Ellen keeps a photo from their studio wedding on her desk. Jake and Sarah kissing while surrounded by flowers, and the applause of 300 strangers who had become witnesses to a miracle. Next to it sits a note from Jake. "Thank you for showing us that some love stories are so strong they can happen twice." The wedding dress Sarah wore that day is now part of a traveling exhibit about resilience and recovery, demonstrating how love can adapt and thrive even under the most challenging circumstances. It serves as a symbol that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come after what feels like an ending. Today, Jake Mitchell continues his recovery while serving as an advocate for veterans with traumatic brain injuries. His memory has largely returned, but he says the experience of falling in love with Sarah twice has made him appreciate their relationship in ways he never could have imagined before his injury. Sarah has become a counselor for military spouses dealing with similar situations, helping them understand that love can take many forms, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the freedom to love us in a completely new way. Their daughter, born healthy and happy, is now 2 years old. Jake often tells her the story of how he met her mommy twice, and how both times he knew she was the most wonderful woman in the world. Sarah says watching Jake fall in love with their daughter has been like watching him fall in love with her all over again, for the third time. Because sometimes love is so powerful, it survives even when memory doesn't. Sometimes the heart knows what the mind has forgotten, and sometimes the most beautiful proof of true love is when someone chooses you not because they have to, not because they remember promising to, but simply because they can't imagine their life any other way. 5 years later, Jake stood at the podium of the National Military Medical Center, addressing a room full of doctors, researchers, and families affected by traumatic brain injury. His speech began with the same words he had spoken on Ellen's show. "I fell in love with my wife twice, and both times I knew she was the most incredible woman in the world." The audience understood they were hearing from someone who had lived proof that the human capacity for love transcends even the most devastating injuries to the mind. As Jake concluded his presentation, Sarah and their 3-year-old daughter Emma joined him on stage, and something magical happened that no medical textbook could explain. Emma looked up at her father and said, "Daddy, Tell them how you found mommy twice. And in that moment, everyone in the room understood that love doesn't just heal individuals, it creates legacies that inspire generations to believe in the impossible. Their story had come full circle from Ellen's studio to medical conferences worldwide. But the most beautiful proof of their love's power remained the simplest. Every morning, Jake still woke up and chose Sarah all over again. Not because his memory demanded it, but because his heart insisted on it. They had proven that the most profound love stories aren't about remembering the past, but about choosing the same person every single day, creating a future so beautiful it honors every version of love that came before.